We went silent for a bit this summer. For those of you who haven't been here before for the lecture series, الثلث الأخير is a lecture series that was established in January 2012. And so far it's had 5 speakers. We went silent in the summer because it's the summer in Kuwait and everything kind of dies down, but we're up and running again, and super happy to have with us tonight Amal Khalaf. She's the curator at the Serpentine Gallery in London. And so for those of you who don't know about the project, she is the curator of the Edgware Road project at the Serpentine Gallery, which was established in 2009 by Sally Talent. This is really distracting. And it's kind of it was initiated to kind of work with the neighborhoods surrounding the Serpentine Gallery. And it's a commissioning project and an international artist in residency program that invites international artists to interact with people living and working on Edgware Road. And so projects or residencies the duration of residencies has been anywhere from like 3 weeks to 4 years, depending on how involved the artist wants to get with the community. And so Emma will be elaborating on her job at the Serpentine Gallery and focusing on the Edgware Road project. So the Edgware Road project is an itinerant project, although they have been sedentary at moments and they have occupied spaces, 3 until this year. But at the moment, no space. Tonight, so this isn't in any way kind of a didactic presentation. The الأخير lecture series aspires to kind of get people engaged in critical discourse, and by all means we welcome interventions by the public. So if at any point I think you feel like making a statement or intervening, by all means go ahead. It's kind of a discussion. And towards the end of today's presentation we'll be doing an exercise which Emma will talk about, and then also some Q&A. Lecturers in the past have included Eva Frank, Anthony Muntadas, Javier Planas, who else? Guluiyai, Michael Kubo, who will be again in Kuwait in December, and in the upcoming months we'll have Amira from Casa Árabe, and hope. Well, I'm not going to announce all of them because it's kind of still in the works. But this lecture series, it's supported by the National Council and is really kind of the efforts of a couple of individuals working in the Heritage and Restoration Department, Zahra, Abdullah, myself, and some of our other colleagues. So we're very happy to have your support and to have your presence here. And we'd like to also thank our superiors, Samir Abdullah, Abdullah Bishi, obviously Sarah and Shihab. Okay? Anyways, I'll pass it on to Amal. Please help me welcome her tonight.
Thank you, Alia. And thank you, Zahra and Abdullah and the National Arts Council for this amazing invitation. I'm really happy to be in Kuwait, and unbelievably, even though I'm from Bahrain, it's my first time, so I'm super excited. I'm just going to move stuff around. So I'm going to be reading a little, and then I'm going to be going off topic, and I might not be looking behind me, so if this turns off, let me know. I'm going to start. So the picture you see behind you is describing what Alia was saying. Is we're a project that moves around a lot. So even though our mothership is the Serpentine Gallery, we are always off-site. We're an off-site project of the Serpentine Gallery, and it's not just a one-off project. It's like a multi-year project, which is quite rare to find, and we were really lucky to be able to do this. But before I begin, I wanted to speak to you. I wanted to read something. I'm reading from the 10 Dispatches About Place by John Berger from his book Hold Everything Dear, from 2007. I just wanted us to start thinking about place and what it means to think about and work in a site and produce culture in a place. Every day, people follow signs pointing to some place that is not their home, but a chosen destination. Road signs, airport embarkation signs, terminal signs. Some are making their journeys for pleasure, others for business, many out of loss or despair. On arrival, they come to realize that they're not in the place indicated by the signs they followed. Where they now find themselves has the correct latitude, longitude, local time, currency, yet it does not have the specific gravity of the destination they chose. They are beside the place they chose to come to. The distance that separates them from it is incalculable. Maybe it's only the width of a thoroughfare, maybe it's a world away. The place has lost what made it a destination. It has lost its territory of experience. Sometimes, a few of these travelers undertake a private journey and find the place they wish to reach, which is often harsher than they foresaw, although they discover it with boundless relief. Many never make it. They accept the signs they follow, and it's as if they don't travel, as if they always remain where they already are. Even though Berger here is referring to the late capitalist condition, he's talking about globalization. It was like in the context of talking about refugees and financial migration. And the idea of the disconnection with the local that happens with that movement, with the constant movement. I want to kind of think about the idea that he's writing about here in the context of thinking about a local space and making a commitment to working in one place, be it a city or be it on the scale of a road. The Edgware Road is a very local place, even though it seems at first a really here and elsewhere place. It's a place where you see many languages. It's a place that feels very global, like the whole of London. But yeah, I just wanted to kind of start off with that. Just for those of you that don't know, the Serpentine Gallery. The Serpentine Gallery is a non-profit international gallery based in the Kensington Gardens, just south of the Edgware Road and north of Kensington. I think I made a map. Okay, so the Serpentine Gallery is just like down there somewhere. And I work here. Yeah. And we've just had a crazy week. We've opened our second gallery, the Serpentine Sackler Gallery, with a new extension by Zaha Hadid. So it's been an amazing, crazy week. But the gallery, as people who know about it know, it's even though it's quite a small space, and now quite small two spaces, it has a huge imprint. And it's very important for the gallery to be doing work outside of the gallery space. They, for 10 years, have been working with artists working in a social context and continue to commission really experimental projects like the Edgware Road project. So in the case of Edgware Road, we're talking about a very complicated place. It's a site of cultural contradictions of late capitalism. Several migrant communities exist on one side of fast redevelopment in one of the highest real estate square miles of London, alongside one of the largest working class communities in central London. It's the home of thousands of people living in social housing, including thousands of refugees from Iraq, Syria, and Somalia. And on the other side of the road, down near Marble Arch, Tony Blair has an amazing house on Connaught Square, and he's the envoy to the Middle East in the UK. So there are a lot of contradictions that we live with every day just there. There are lots of terms that you hear a lot by the council around the Edgware Road. People talk about cleaning up, getting rid of beggars, people that don't live up to the central London, Hyde Park look. And it's just a place of a lot of movement. It's built on the edge of a now underground river called Wear, and it's intersected by a canal and a main artery in and out of London. It's the first destination for many migrant communities from many parts of the world, and in the past 40 years, it's been very visibly welcoming migrants from the Middle East. Cafes on the road have been and continue to be places for distributing stories of these movements, enabling those who live and work here to inhabit multiple cartographies. But with this history of movement is a history of non-movement. Fears of such mobility and change is reflected in the rules and regulations imposed by local councils on the migrant mobile communities working and congregating on the road. Land ownership in the Edgware Road has stayed still for many centuries. So I've gotten to know real estate so well through this art project. I never ever thought that I would, but I've realized that in London, at least, it's something like 5 families, 5 people that own all of the land. And on one half of the Edgware Road, it's all owned by the Portman Estate, and on the other half, it's owned by the Crown and the Church of England. So it's quite amazing because the Portman Estate got these lands in 1600. So we're talking about really like holding on to land ownership here. But even though people own the land there, and even though things stay still, Edgware Road still feels like a place that's changing all the time. I mean, it was originally a Roman road, so it's seen 2,000 years of change. And a lot of the people that come to the Centre for Possible Studies, which is the headquarters of the Edgware Road project, come in from a lot of different places, and everybody's sharing stories about borders, about movement, about migration. This is one of the Centre for Possible Studies. Here in the midst of all this and the gallery's own complexities, we created a place called the Centre for Possible Studies. What could possibility mean here? Our project was set up as a space for research into the possible. Since 2009, the Centre for Possible Studies, the Edgware Road Project's itinerant headquarters, has had 3 locations in the neighbourhood. We follow, just like a lot of people on the road that have to deal with constant redevelopment, selling off of properties to developers that want to create luxury flats and so on, we have to move around as well. So this space was our second space. Our first space was an old hairdresser's. It used to be the Queen Mother's hairdresser, and that was on the other side of Edgware Road. This is on the right side of Edgware Road, and it's this used to be George Michael's favorite Italian restaurant in the 80s. It was really smelly when we got it. It was really weird, but we had 2 floors of this. So what happens in the Centre for Possible Studies is we host residencies, but we host a lot of events as well. We do exhibitions. We run tons of different workshops, but we also open it up to people in the neighborhood, so people in the community can use it as they will. So when I say we have a publishing imprint, we had like a risograph printer that anybody on the road could use. So people did print menus there, for example. A lot of activist groups used to print flyers and so on. The space that we had after this was amazing. It was a 3-floor Georgian mansion. I think you just missed that one. But yeah, Alia met us when we had just become homeless. Yeah, it was usually the pavilion. So in the moments that when we don't have a space, we occupy these spaces. This is Shishawi. This is a one of our favorite spots on the Edgware Road. It's 51 to 53 Edgware Road. It's got a really long, amazing history. It's been newsreel theatre in the Second World War. It became an experimental cinema, the first one to screen Realm of the Senses in the UK, and all of the Nouvelle Vague films, they were first screened here. It then went into disrepair, and then an Egyptian businessman came and turned it into an Arabic cinema in the 80s, and realized he wasn't making enough money from all of the Khalijis that were coming to the road, and he turned it into a nightclub called Al-Rimal, and people like Sabah have sung there. Like, it's an amazing, amazing place, and if anyone wants to see an archive of it, we have a full archive of videos of concerts that happened in this spot. But I'll continue. So as the center kind of moves around in cafes, basements, schools, and community center, we basically start to really become aware in these moments when we're actually working in existing buildings, existing spaces on the street, about the politics of what's really going on there. So on top of like the general activities that we do, we've been running 25 large-scale residencies and commissions. So artist residencies with the Edgware Road project, they last between 3 weeks to 4 and sometimes even 5 years. We have quite a large commissioning budget, and it just depends on the artist and who, you know, what they're working with, what their practice is, who they're working with in the neighborhood, how long their project goes on for. But everybody's invited to create a possible study. That's how we frame it. So it's really a space of research, and we really approach it from a place of everybody's researching together. So we don't just have artists in residence, we've got writers in residence, researchers, academics, activists from the street. We work with a group of waiters from the street, undocumented migrants from a legal center nearby. So there are all these people that are in residence with us, and we name them as such. So a lot of what we do builds on a history of radical education and pedagogy and informal education that has been going on the road for a long time. So just for some examples, in the 50s and 60s, the free cinema movement, I don't know if you guys know about the free cinema movement. It was a movement where a group of young British filmmakers started having cameras they could carry around, and they wanted to start filming things that weren't staged or in studios. They wanted to film real life. So that movement was working completely around the Edgware Road. There was also the Blue Stocking movement. It was a group of feminists that were educating themselves. They were literally 1 square away from the Georgian mansion we were working at. So we really want to draw on that history of informal education and research. And we think about where art can also be a form of research, and what kind of artistic practices and how artistic practices can produce knowledge. Yes. But we'd also like to acknowledge, apart from all of these amazing histories from the 60s and 70s, the kind of informal research that's already going on the Edgware Road itself. And I'm talking about here the Lebanese or Egyptian cafes and restaurants up and down the Edgware Road. Some of them have meeting rooms, like the Wednesday night in Shishawi in this place. They have a Wednesday evening Egyptian intellectual exiles meeting, and they give lectures every Wednesday, and they all give lectures themselves, and it's amazing. It's everyone's welcome to come, and it all happens up there. It all happens here, actually. So, it's just amazing. Like, there's so many things that are going on. So, for example, Shishawi. So, this is the upstairs of Shishawi. You saw downstairs with the amazing decor. So, up here, this is Tariq. He's He's a music producer. He's the son of musicians that have been playing on the Edgware Road since the 60s and 70s. And he has a studio there. Right next door to him is a human rights lawyer. Next door to him is the CCTV room of the boss, who just sits there completely surrounded by CCTV. It's also a prayer room, and the Egyptian intellectuals meet up there. So that there's like, we really want to acknowledge that there are already spaces where all of this stuff is happening at the same time, and we don't want to take away from that. We just kind of want to do something as well. Another example is another friend of ours at Cybertex and 453 Edgware Road, and they are an internet cafe, a really like tiny internet cafe, but it's also the headquarters of the London International Kurdish Film Festival. So there's a lot of cultural activity already going on the street. The invention of the Center for Possible Studies as a meeting place for many people with many desires, agendas, and stakes in the neighborhood originates in the hope that it is possible to reorient a series of existing practices, be them artistic or political, towards the desires of the local context. When I named today's talk Mapping the Possible, I wanted to start a conversation with all of you here in Kuwait who come from a context which, in the Gulf, has a strong history of cultural production, cultural institutions, and art practice. And there is so much potential here for redefining what an art space or what cultural production can be. And just to give further background, I'm from Bahrain, and so I worked in Bahrain as well, and it was a massive eye-opener for me when I went to London, because it was such an industry of art. There are 500 galleries there. Everybody I worked with had like 2 degrees in art. I came from a film background. It was like kind of, okay, I'm coming from somewhere else. I don't have like exactly the same qualifications as everybody. And there's also like a really strong like history of what outreach is, and it's something that everyone has to do. And there's this idea of target audiences and new audiences and reaching new audiences. And I know I could relate to that in a way, because coming from Bahrain, it was like a really big deal for us to have a gallery and get people to come that weren't the people that always come, and it's really important. It was really important to me in Bahrain. It still is, and I guess I was trying to translate that idea in London. But the way that it goes, like in the industry of the art world, is it becomes quite piecemeal, and it becomes quite automatic, and it becomes about numbers, and it becomes almost like a military operation. And I think it was really important for us to think about, the responsibility, being in an institution that has, or being in a project that had the kind of budget and scope that we had, to think about that responsibility, and to think about what can we do that's different, and how can we actually embody a practice that might be a different way. And it's all experimentation, because not all of it works all the time. I mean, I don't know if it's the case here as much, because the art scene's changing so much in the Gulf, I can't keep up. But in the UK, there are exhibitions or whole education programs that are just totally named after a corporation, or in like really the worst cases, you get developers that are trying to make changes in a neighborhood, and they will instrumentalize artists to do a show or do a project to make everybody happy, or and art is really being used in quite wrong ways, I think. For it's not all art is not all transformative, and it's not like all good, and it's just because it's art. And I think it's really important to say that, like, because there's so many art educators that are just on this loop, and they're just like, yeah, sure, we've got £100 and we're going to do a workshop for like 500 kids, and we want to ask questions about what it is that's happening in the workshop, and how how long can we have this conversation for? And if we have it for long enough, is something new going to happen? But yes, I still do believe in the transformative power of art, and it's important that art remains visible and is a space for reflection and agency. But I think it's really important to constantly ask ourselves the question why, and in service of what configurations of power are our projects working. So when the Center for Possible Studies began to enter the Edgware Road neighborhood, it was very important to ask, what if we were to remap cultural activities around social commitments? That is, in relation to struggles in the neighborhood, rather than creating an us versus them, and I mean, we're the artists, we're the gallerists, we're the heroic creatives, and they're the community that need help. We're very much against this notion of outreach, and we began the idea that we would try to make an alignment with the people we're working with, and imagine an art space with local and popular struggles. This also begins to blur the lines between who's producing what knowledge and who's producing the project and all of that stuff. So everybody at the Center for Possible Studies is a co-researcher, and we very much use that word co in a lot of what we do. Okay, so this image now, and this is for a bit later on if you guys are up for it. I can't tell the mood at the moment. But these are pictures of desire lines. Do you guys know what desire lines are? Desire lines are like that. Okay, so that's the desire line. The road was built, and they wanted, the developers, the architects, they wanted to have a beautiful square in front of the universities. But because, for practical reasons, because people wanted to, enough people walked through that they created their own road. So that is what a desire line is. It was first coined by Gaston Bachelard in his 1957 book, The Poetics of Space. The word is now used mostly by urban planners to describe shortcuts or paths like this, markings that alter the plan of an official urban design. The beauty of allowing desire lines to emerge naturally is that it allows for human problem solving and wayfinding to physically manifest in the world around us. As urban planners are becoming more open to this idea, and they respect this kind of like people shaping their own cities, I think they're beginning to realize that them being experts cannot always predict how people will use and make sense of public space. And we really take this approach at the Center for Possible Studies, and what we like to do is try and map out where the desire lines are, and not physical ones, maybe just the way that people, I gave an example earlier of how there are language classes that are running in cafes. People would rather just sit in the cafes with people they know and drink coffee and whatever than go to a school. Like sponsored by the UK Border Agency for migrants to learn English. So I wanted to think a little bit about this context here in Kuwait, and whether or not maybe we could map out situations. I don't know. I know there are lots of artists and architects in the room. Maybe there are people that are already thinking about these kind of spaces and how you can kind of reify them or give them power, you know what I mean, by lending them the power of the cultural institution or the artist to them, and kind of make official what people want to make official somehow. So how do we account for all of these differing desires when you're part of an institution that's already really built around their own desires? So I'm talking about the Center for Possible Studies and the Serpentine Gallery. I mean, in London, a lot of people don't believe that I work for the Serpentine Gallery. A lot of people just come to the Center for Possible Studies. They've come to our events. They're kind of informal. They have a different feeling to them. They have a different politics to them. And how do we exist as the same institution, basically? I think it's exciting. I mean, the thing is with cultural institutions like museums, they work very much on the time frame of exhibitions. And as I was saying before, the idea of the residencies being 4 years long is so that we can continue that conversation beyond like the 6 weeks or 2 months of an exhibition. Because sometimes there's so much work. There's a book. There's like the most interesting like lifetime of reading to do about one exhibition. But then it dies and it goes away and it becomes a book. Okay, it stays as a book, but we're trying to imagine what could happen if this went on for 4 years, for example. And now we do have a few examples. And I am going to start talking about the project soon. So I was saying, because we're able to work on this long time frame, the Center for Possible Studies has very much been shaped by the people we're working with. So even though it's myself and Jana Graham, who's the curator of the project, it's us two that kind of are the Center for Possible Studies. A lot of how the center has grown has been developed by the artists, by the people we're working with. We've had activist groups in residence with us for 4 years now. They are the ones that bought a printer. They're the reason why we have a publishing imprint at the center as the Edgware Road project. We worked with a group of artists in 2009 and set up an analog film lab. We gave anybody that walked in the door 60 feet of 16mm film, and we taught them how to use it, and we tried to collaboratively make a film about the Edgware Road with 60 different filmmakers and edit it collaboratively. It failed. That was a failed experiment. We do have a film, but what came out of that, it was just like there was so much energy around these 2 months of free filmmaking and workshops that the Free Cinema strand, we call it the Free Cinema School Salon. It's a strand we have. It's a monthly film screening. At first was weekly, but I was exhausted, where we were screening all over in cafes on the road. But anyway, it's a monthly strand of screenings about film production. We have different, it's been 4 years now, but different frameworks emerge out of the project and it's very important for us that that's happening, and so I'll talk through a few more of those in a minute. Yeah.
The spirit of intervention.
Please.
Could you talk a little bit more about striking this balance between kind of like random, not random opportunities that literally come to the door and then building that into something that can potentially fail. Because you were talking earlier also, there's this really heavy hand with cultural institutions in the UK and the United States as well. So not for the bodies that go to the door. And a lot of that has to do with funding. Numbers equals funding. So how do you deal with those kinds of random elements and create something and potentially risk failure? Why is that okay?
I think, I had like an amazing buffer zone for 4 years. We had really, really great funders that didn't really need that kind of reporting. It wasn't like the Arts Council that was our main, like the Serpentine get money from them, sure, but we don't have to report to them on in that way. We had like dream funding somehow for 4 years, and now we're out of that zone, and so I'm much more accountable for those kind of things. But at the same time, my deliveries are less in terms of that. Like I'm working on 2 books now, and because the residencies are coming to an end. Also, I'll speak through a few of the projects we've done, but a lot of them are so big that randoms can sometimes fit into them, you know. So if you're working with Camp, I'm going to speak about a hackerspace media art collective from Bombay we've been working with for 5 years. They've developed a framework and an online archive and editing tool where you can make table mats, pamphlets, 200-page books, which is what I'm doing now with them, all on this website, which is like an InDesign Google Doc, like 7 people can edit at the same time. And they developed that completely with open source software like 3 years ago, and it was really new at the time. And yeah, I'll speak about how that grows, because, you know, a lot of people can fit into that because it's an archive of the history of the neighborhood. And a lot of the time we can kind of say, oh, that person is doing a possible study, and it will end up being a pamphlet for the edgewareroad.org, which was funded by the Heritage Lottery Fund, yeah, for example. That's kind of how we've been able to get away with it, but it's less and less, and I do feel the difference, because before, you know, what happened before, if I was working at the gallery, someone would come to me and they had an amazing project and they want to do a screening, and it's just the best film ever, and they're only here for 3 days, and I could have screened it at the Center for Possible Studies. At the Serpentine, I would need like 1 month lead time, high-res image, tell our PR person, press release, you know, all of that stuff. Whereas where the Center for Possible Studies was a really responsive space, you know, it felt like an activist space somehow because of the kind of people that were there, and because of how decisions were made and how fast things could happen, you know. Which is why a lot of things did happen. But I also should mention this. We have 2 project partners. One's a townhouse in Cairo, and the other's Ashkal Alwan in Beirut. So they were very early project partners, and we developed an exchange framework with them. And we're now on a 3rd exchange framework, which Alia was part of, and I'll speak about that later. But we did a lot of exchanges, and I was working 3 months of the year in Cairo, for example, very lucky for me, but we did lots of interventions there, and what happens would be like 2 artists came from Beirut, or 2 artists came from Cairo, and then we would send artists that have been working with us on developing frameworks in London, we would send them over. So this is when Camp went to Homeworks in Beirut in 2010, and they set up, they run this project called Padma, which is like a film archive, and they set up the first Arabic language Padma, where people could upload films, extracts of films, research, and it's like people can add a lot of metadata to it. So you can watch a film, but then if you press pause or you press around the image in Padma, you can get a lot, like you can get links to websites, essays can turn up, like all of this stuff. So they did that. And this is in Sanaya House. So we work a lot with like other kind of smaller spaces. This was an apartment that was like a residency, but it was just a house basically. So maps. There are lots of maps going on, but I'm going to kind of skip through the maps. There are just so many ways to produce knowledge and networks, but I won't speak about all of them. Oh, but I was going to speak about how I came, like how people approach the Edgware Road. And for me, the first thing I thought of when I first was invited to do research on the road, I did think of Bye Bye London. One, because there are Bye Bye London signs everywhere in London, but it's not the film. But yeah, just thinking about the here and elsewhere of the street, and all of the very many ways you can enter the Edgware Road. And this was mine because it was a very early memory I had of being really full on Friday lunch, listening to my uncles talk about someone not paying for an apartment rent on a house in Edgware Road, and then going to Edgware Road and buying a newspaper and being a street like I really wasn't going to go to when I was living in London until I got this work, and now I'm there. I've been there more than anywhere else in the last 4 years. But yeah, I wanted to show you another map.
Wait, that's not where we used to go and eat lunch.
Not in the square.
No, it wasn't, did I? Banks in the area. There's Bank of Kuwait, there's a Swiss bank, and there's an English bank, and there's NatWest and Nationwide.
Trying to dial the number, which is the number so that you can get access to a beautiful green square, which is private. There are lots of private squares in London, and so the girls were kind of walking around the neighbourhood and realising
the Montague
about what's private,
menu,
what's public.
the bakery
and what that
basket,
means.
£6.50. Pancakes and maple syrup, £6.50. Eggs Benedicts, £9.50. Full English breakfast, £19.50. Full buffet, £27.50.
Okay, that's enough of that. This is another map. I mean, I was just going to mention here with the Ultra Red project, these artists have been, they're amazing actually. They're a sound art collective called Ultra Red. If you don't know them, you should look them up. They started out as AIDS activists in the 90s, and they actually started out as a record label. And they realized that the art world was way more open to funding the kind of work that they do, so they became artists. And they've been working really like, they're very methodical, and they do a lot of sound walks and field recordings. And I have to say about our project is like it's just like a crazy archive full of a repository of so many different like mappings of the area. So they were, Ultra Red go into the school, and they enter the school, and it's Citizenship Day, and they teach citizenship in schools in the UK. But after the artist experience on Edgware Road, they realize that there's such a gulf between what's being taught and what's real. So they got everybody in the school to do the UK citizenship test. And if I kept that thing going, you would have heard some of the questions. But like they've been doing a lot of mapping, 4 years of mappings around this idea of migration and citizenship, the way that the students interpreted it as well was kind of about their idea, the idea of them being a citizen of the school, and working out what it means to be an active citizen and a subject, basically. But this was a mapping, so it's kind of like a physical map, because we filmed eight different activists or teachers and students on rooftops across the Edgware Road. So you can see different views of the road. But here they're kind of reading their statements. I was just going to skip through a few of these. So there's a lot of listening that happens at the center, and this work, it's about 6 hours long in a loop. And what happens is we filmed each person on either side of the table, and there's a moment where they're listening and a moment where they're speaking their message. And this moment, both of them are listening.
We speak as citizens of this city.
This is at the
as
Serpentine
students,
Gallery.
Young women and immigrants, or children of immigrants. We have been told that our futures and that we are free.
Sorry.
We are told to trust the economy and that it is the foundation of our freedoms. We are told that a bigger economy will solve the inequality between classes, races, countries, and women and men. Yet inequality seems to be getting worse. Rich people get richer, and more people become poorer. Is this freedom? The difference between people is bigger, not smaller. This includes policing borders between countries and within countries.
I'm just going to stop it there. I just, they're very, passionate. So they really took in like everything that the artists were saying, I think, with that. But basically, this is kind of like one of the works. I don't want to play it all because I'd like to show you a few more projects that we've been doing. So this was an artist, Hiwa K. He came, he's Kurdish Iraqi, he's from Slimani, and when he came to the road, he stepped out of the bus, and he's been living in Germany for the past 20 years. He walked out of Iraq, like he walked to Italy or something crazy, 25 years ago or whatever. And when he came to the road for his residency with us, he stepped out and he saw a friend of his from Slimani, from his town. And so that way, Jana and I were introduced to this whole other community on the road, and now we know all of them, all of those dudes. So his project was, we were around and people were talking. There was a screening of Shock Doctrine by Naomi Klein, and Naomi Klein is talking about the neoliberal project in Iraq. Said the war in Iraq was a neoliberal project, and so he says, what's neoliberal? And so we started this research group, which was kind of a self-education around what neoliberalism is and like how late capitalism started. And at the same time, when we were getting bored, we were watching YouTube videos from the 70s and 80s. And we created a band. So we were singing. We became a band of about 13 people, of researchers and musicians that were exchanging stories of when neoliberalism came to their own country. So this was happening in cafes on the road, and so we were singing Gugoosh, singing Bendeley Family, Do You Love Me? I'm not really sure why, except that it was amazing. We sang songs from the 60s in Afghanistan by Ahmed Zahir, and many, many more. I'm just going to play. It's very chaotic, like this performance, but this is how the Chicago Boys performances are always.
As you see, like these performances are
I don't know if the sound.
not by music, but they made by event. So it's very, very much about maybe my memories as a child. So I was quite young, and I'm still young, come on. But I was like, we had this Iran-Iraq war, and there was TV set by Saddam for, Saddam's government. It's called Mujahideen Khalq. It was anti-Iranian government, anti-Islamic government. And at that time, we had those guys like Gugush, Dariush, and all of these disco from 70s Iran. It was used as propaganda against Iran, against the Islamic Republic of the Jamhuriya Islami. And at the same time, there was also this kind of chobichu that it was also appropriated by Saddam in order to describe his charisma. And whenever you play this rhythm, when people are from Iraq, they immediately get like shivers, because it reminds them of some time. So I thought it's interesting to make them match, these two guys, these two forms, which they don't match by music, but they match by event. So we were thinking like, that's why it was one of the parts we were playing. And now I think Helena is going to sing. No? You want to sing? Sorry. Oh, you want to sing?
Save Helena. But yeah, there are lots of things going on there. It's like a really amateur band performance or something. And there were like loads of people at this. There was like 200 or whatever. But it like goes on forever, and there are all of these negotiations. But it's really important, those negotiations, because we wanted to hear with this project, and because it was just, it's such a nice vibe, one, to have a band and like to do that whole process, but as well to tell stories along the way. And it happens between the bands, and a lot of people aren't musicians. Like most people don't know what's going on in terms of the music. We just all try, and but there's all of these exchanges going on. So. Exchanges about histories of neoliberalism. There are exchanges about language, like how to pronounce. There's someone Persian speaking in our group that's saying, you're saying something crazy when you're singing this song or whatever. And this band also travels, and I just wanted to kind of present this towards the end, because a lot of things that have spawned out of the Center for Possible Studies have become their own entities. So the Chicago Boys, and the name of this band is called Chicago Boys. While we were singing, they were dreaming. And we've been on tour in 6 countries now: Poland, Holland, Slovenia, Germany, Korea, and basically the band grows every time, because new members of the band have to join, because they have to be part of this exchange. So the band is now 60 people, and it's a really expensive project to run. We're gonna come to the Gulf next. But yeah, I'm gonna kind of stop. There's so many projects. We do 25, and I'm not gonna talk through each one. But it would be great to maybe have a chat. Maybe we can talk about the Desire Line stuff, or I can answer any questions.
No, it's Jana in the video.
Oh yeah, that was Jana. Yeah, that's the other thing that happens is because of this kind of co-research thing, everyone's like, well, you know, if we're going to do it, you have to do it too. And so, you know, I'm in a band, I run a website. Yeah.
A lot of the projects that they do is to help the people that are involved in the project and help to sustain the project.
Yeah.
And there's a moment that they let go, and that's really wonderful. When I arrived in London, it was the day that they were putting on the project, they're like handing it to the community, and I just said, Jenna, and I just sat there like, they're like the first time they've done it alone, and I was nervous for them. But it was really wonderful.
Yeah.
People adopt.
Yeah, it's pretty amazing. I mean, but there's like a whole process that you have to do. And if there's anyone here that runs a cultural program, like we basically open the budget. We open the budget up to everybody in the group. We're like, well, you know, this is how much the artist is getting paid. This is how much we're paying for rent, and this is how much we're paying for your lunch. So what do you want to do with it now? But that process took a year, you know, like, and a year before that, us hosting the workshops. So, yeah, I guess the one thing I would say is that making a commitment to a place, to a project, to a politics, I don't know, it pays a lot of dividends. Things happened through this project which just can't happen without the time. And the commitment. So, yeah.
But I think we have the opposite of desire lines. We kind of have anti-desire lines, which are like streets and corners or whatever that we have. They work against you being a pedestrian, actually, which is kind of funny, like, and at the same time, not so healthy to have. Like, I mean, for me, for example, when you travel and you see the roads. And they have the little like cycle line, and they have the pedestrian line, and you have the line for the cars. Here there's only cars, and there's only cars taking over. So it's kind of anti-desire lines.
Anti-human.
I'm learning a lot of Arabic being here, and like the meaning of things and details, because it's like if your paper is missing a stamp or a signature on the left upper hand corner, then it's wrong. So it's a wonderful like language learning opportunity that's not happening in a school. But to kind of try and erode the bureaucracy, to kind of subvert it is the mission, is the ultimate mission, you know? And it's, I've worked from outside of the institution, and I've worked from inside of the institution, and I find it very challenging, but very fulfilling when actually something's accomplished. And so I'm happy that you guys, I mean, your presence here tonight is also a testament of kind of this lecture series sort of succeeding, and Emma being here, and things kind of changing, and the collective as well. And so yeah, those are the desire lines that I want to see more of in Kuwait.
Yeah.
And
yeah, I guess what you're saying about there's so many desire lines, Khalid, is like, yeah, that's how I feel about Bahrain somehow. It's just like there's just so many, because people are just doing it, you know, because they need to do it and no one else is doing it. It just happens, yeah.
You have to do it yourself, you know.
Do yourself.
Yeah, you have to do it yourself, and you know, it becomes more organic.
oh yeah. There's
business license through the government or like having to rent out a space, and they just completely function on Instagram. Like it's become this whole, they don't have any websites, they just have a WhatsApp number and they deliver a big to your door. So it's, I feel like that's a desire line that people here kind of made for themselves just so they can survive or like do what they want to do, because there are so many lines blocking them from doing it so simply.
Yeah, that's a really cool one. Can sell art on Instagram. People do already. Yeah, it's like such a thing. Like it's like totally a thing. Anyway, guys, thank you so much for coming and listening to me talk about the Edgware Road project. Thank you, guys.
Thanks everyone for coming, and وشكرا حق إدارة العلاقات العامة لأن they did a great job in helping us arrange this. So